Hello and welcome back to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines. My name is Pat Burnham, and we are joined today by, as always on Thursdays, the legend Charles Fishbein, our recruiting analyst. And on Thursdays, as we like to do every game week, is have a guest from the other rival site join us to talk a little bit about Florida State's opponent. And this week we have Conor O'Neill from Duke Illustrated to join us to kind of educate us on the Blue Devils. And Conor, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, well, listen, it's kind of been a bizarro college football world from our perspective here in Tallahassee, and nothing probably signifies that more than a 1-5 Florida State team traveling to Duke as an underdog to take on a 5-1 Blue Devils team. So the strange year, the hellacious year that Florida State is having continues. But Conor, we just wanted to bring you in. Obviously, you've been covering Duke for a long time, and just kind of talk to you about what you've seen from the Blue Devils. And obviously a lot of changes. Mike Elko goes to Texas A&M. Your quarterback goes to Notre Dame. They've kind of brought in Manny Diaz and Malik Murphy, and kind of the faces of the program right now. But just talk to us a little bit about the biggest differences between Duke's program under Manny and then under Mike Elko, and what has he brought maybe that's added some fuel to the fire as Duke has had a really great three-season run right now.
Yeah, honestly, it kind of starts with one thing that's remained a constant, and that's strength and conditioning coach David Feely. He was with Manny for 3 years in Miami, and when Manny got fired and Mario came in and brought in his own guy, Mike Elko actually brought David Feely to Durham. So they've been able to kind of stay at this level. I went into the season saying that a successful season for Duke would be 6 or 7 wins and just maintain the trajectory. The class they have committed right now would be the highest ranked class I think Rivals has ever had for Duke. So it was more about sustaining, and that started really with keeping David Feely as the strength and conditioning coach. They lost a bunch. Obviously, Riley Leonard leaving. They lost Jordan Waters, the running back, to NC State. They lost huge chunks of both lines. They had 2 draft picks on the offensive line. One of them was a first rounder in Graham Barton, who's now down in Tampa. They had Dwayne Carter was a draft pick of the Bills. They lost Jamion Franklin to the NFL. He was out of eligibility. They lost Aeneas Peebles to Virginia Tech, and they lost also to Notre Dame, R.J. Oben. So they lost a ton from last year. It's kind of funny to think about how many players were in key spots when these teams played a year ago, right at about this time, and how many of those players are just gone. It's a huge turnover on both sides for both teams. But Duke's been able to kind of sustain and maintain. They've obviously had a little easier of a schedule than Florida State has to this point, but it's gone better than expected, I think, for Duke so far.
Yeah, I know, David. I interviewed for a job at Ball State with Pete Limbo when David Feely was there as his strength coach, and actually had a chance to go out to lunch and dinner with David. He's an interesting guy, high energy, and well thought of in the profession for sure. All right, so they are 5-1, and you mentioned the schedule. It has not been that great. Combined winning percentage, winning record, or one-loss record for their FBS opponents through 5 games is 17-16 versus Florida State 6, which have a 27-10 record. But at the end of the day, it's about beating who's on your schedule, as we found out last year in Tallahassee and again this year. How surprised are you, despite maybe what many people would consider a weaker schedule at the 5-1 start, given all the turnover?
Honestly, I thought they would lose the non-conference game. I thought a loss to at Northwestern was a funky Friday night game. They've got that temporary stadium up there. The wind was howling off the lake. They were, you can say they were lucky to win that one. They were lucky to beat UConn at home. They were up 17-0 and threw a fluky pick six that was like off a defender's helmet and into the arms of a guy running the other way. And all of a sudden they were down 21-17 and then came back and won that one. You could go through and say they were pretty lucky to win some of these games that they've won. Middle Tennessee committed a ton of turnovers. It's a 5-1 Duke team that you could argue, and I don't know how much I would be willing to argue against it, that they should be 3-3.
Okay.
So, but like you said, like they have won the games. You can't take those away. You can't. They get credit for winning games that went down in the ledger as wins. So here they are at 5-1.
Go ahead, Fish.
No, I just want to jump in real quick. I was a huge Riley Leonard fan. I remember the first moment that I saw him that you guys had played Louisville, and Louisville was blowing you out, and he went 14 for 14. And I remember telling people, man, this kid's really good. One thing your prior coach was able to do is find quarterbacks. How would you compare Malik to Riley? What are their strengths, weaknesses of each guy that you like about Murphy now that maybe that Leonard didn't bring, or vice versa?
I honestly think the only similarity between the two is the position they play. They're just like, Riley is a runner. He is every bit the dual threat quarterback, and I would argue that I don't know what's happened to his arm this year. He's not making the same throws that I think we saw at Duke, at least in his first year as a starter at Duke in 22. Last year Duke's running game was so good, and he was a part of that. That I haven't seen him make the same throws the little bit that I've seen of Notre Dame this year. Malik is not a runner. Malik has, I think, one scramble, no design runs in 6 games.
He had 9 total credited runs, which most of them are sacks, right?
Yeah. I mean, he got outside the pocket once at Northwestern, and I think went to make a cut, and his feet slipped out from under him. Now, there's a lot of consternation about their temporary turf they've got in the stadium there, but no matter which way you cut it, like, Malik is not a running threat. Honestly, I think he might be maybe this generation's Byron Leftwich, like not quite that big of size, but he's not looking to break the pocket. He's looking to sit in the pocket and deliver an accurate throw. And so he relies on it. Duke relies on that from him. They don't ask him to run. Manny is big on telling us, like I've asked earlier in the season, like whether they wanted him to run, whether they needed him to pull it on an RPO just like once or twice to get people to respect it. And the answer has basically been no, because the offense has worked at Miami, both with a scrambler when they had De'Aaron King back there, and it worked with Tyler Van Dyke, who was not a scrambler, was not a runner, was a lot more of a pocket passer. So they're not looking for Malik to do many of the same things that Riley did. And I think if you put Riley back into this offense and ask him to be a pocket passer, it would look completely different in that term.
Yeah, and Malik's a big guy, 6'5", 230 is what they have him listed as. And you're right, they have really, 67% of his pass attempts have been straight dropbacks. And they do a little play action, 33%. But he's when I looked at his stats or started doing research, I thought, because he is a good athlete. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But he's certainly passed first. He's not a statue back there. But I was surprised when I saw he'd only been credited with 9 rushing attempts, and of course, most of those are from sacks, which he has not been sacked very much. And usually we skip to the running backs, and we'll get there. But I do want to talk about the offensive line, since you mentioned the fact that he has not run the ball very much, and they have kept him very clean this year. Is that more and is that more about who they've played, or how that unit up front has performed for him? Because they seem to be a much better pass blocking group at Duke's offensive line than run blocking.
Not trying to take anything away from their offensive line, because what they did with that unit is probably the best thing that's been done with this team through the first half of the season. I mean, in Duke's spring game, they couldn't even have a real spring game because they only had 5 offensive linemen in pads. They had to bring in basically 2/3 of their offensive line room had to come in over the summer from the transfer portal. They had the guys committed. They had some of them committed in January. They just couldn't get them to campus until after the spring semester. But a lot of the low sack number is just based on design of the offense and getting the ball out quick. Like his average time to throw in maybe 3 or 4 of the 6 games is under 2 seconds. Like a lot of time, like they'll run a jet sweep and he'll have a pop pass to a guy motioning into the backfield. I mean, you're not getting sacked on that play unless you're fumbling the ball around or whatever. So it's a lot of product. Like they've done great things with the offensive line, but I would stop short of giving the offensive line a ton of credit for keeping him clean.
Yeah. What is kind of you mentioned some of the pop passes, and it is an interesting stat, and I'd have to go back and I'm not compared to FSU's offense or anybody else's, but 46 of his completions have come from behind the line of scrimmage. So what is the philosophy of the offense under Manny? Obviously, there are some pop passes. Certainly, I think I had 45 screen plays is what I tracked. But what is kind of their philosophy on offense at Duke this year?
Yeah, they just want to get it out quick and to playmakers in space. And I know that basically what everybody wants to do with playmakers these days, but they'll throw screens. Like I think it was their first touchdown against UNC was a swing pass to the running back out of the backfield as a safety valve. And Star Thomas turned that into a 30-yard catch and run because he just got to the edge before the Carolina's much maligned defense could get out there to him. So you'll see some running back screens. You'll see some screens to slot receivers. All they want to do is kind of give playmakers a chance to get out there and make some plays and make one guy miss and chew up yards.
Yeah, well, you've got a couple of playmakers on offense for sure, and one of them is Star Thomas, the running back. I know Fish is a big fan of his. What kind of back is Star? What are the strengths of his game?
So I kind of feel like I was misled a little bit. I think the New Mexico State roster had him listed at like 6 foot 225. So I went through the whole spring thinking they were getting this bowling ball of a back who would just be more of a change of pace to Jaquez Moore, who's been hurt, has pretty much only played 1 snap since early in the Northwestern game, which was their second game of the year. Star Thomas is not 225 pounds. He might be 205 or 210. Okay. I think Duke's roster now has him at like 6 foot 200 or 205.
210, 6 foot 210.
Yeah, he is a much more complete back than I thought he would be. He catches the ball out of backfield. Got in the Carolina game, he had something like 16 missed tackles forced or something like that. He was one behind Ashton Jeanty for the lead in that week of college football for missed tackles forced.
Yeah.
He's got a great center of balance, and he's able to take a hit or two and kind of bounce off and keep going forward. And I think that is really one of the most valuable traits a running back can have this day and age of football, because you're always getting hit. That's why those guys have such short careers. But he's been better than what I thought he would be. He's been different than what I thought he would be.
Yeah, you mentioned he's got 25 forced missed tackles on the season, and what impressed me as I got into the research is 330, meaning over half of his yards have come after initial contact. What are the chances that Jaquez Moore makes it back for this game? Any?
I think they're decent. He had pretty much gotten back from the Northwestern injury, and they put him in there for 1 snap against Carolina, and he had another injury. It was a separate injury. It wasn't a re-aggravation. I think it was to the opposite foot of what he had done to himself at Northwestern.
Okay.
We weren't told that it was anything significant. Injury information is a little tougher to come by at Duke than other schools.
We understand that here.
Manny's always been one to hide stuff too with the players.
Yeah, they had a starting linebacker who we didn't realize was going to miss the Northwestern game until a couple hours before they were up there. So, yeah, I think there's a chance we could see Jaquez suit up for this, but I also think that they're comfortable with what Starr gives them and with what the sophomore behind him, Peyton Jones, has been able to do. He scored the game-winning touchdown against Carolina. So if they're without Jaquez again, I think they still feel good about what they have.
Yeah, and you've got some playmakers on offense. I know Florida State fans are probably familiar with Jordan Moore, who has obviously been there a couple of years, leading receiver, but probably less familiar with some of the other guys, particularly Eli Pancole. I guess that's how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
And Shamar Hagens, Quayshawn Brown. Who are the playmakers, and what are the strengths of those four guys?
Eli Pancole has kind of been a revelation. He missed all of last year, so if you're Florida State knowledge, if your fans don't know him, that's completely reasonable. He had a gruesome injury in fall camp last year and missed the whole season. He in the 4 years before that he did suit up, he had 5 total touchdowns. And I say this not as criticism, but I always kind of felt like he was a looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane type of receiver. Like he had this awesome size, but Duke just didn't use him as a red zone threat, even going back to the years that he played under David Cutcliffe. And all of a sudden this year, like he's got 5 touchdowns. He's matched this year how many touchdowns he had in the 4 years before when he suited up. So he's stepped up. He has emerged in his final year of eligibility. He's big, got a big frame, big size, big catch radius, that type of thing. They're looking to get more consistency out of Samir Hagens. He looked like he was on the verge of a breakout season going into last year, and it just never came together. And his touchdown at Georgia Tech, I mean, not to take anything away from him, but it was a busted coverage where Malik just had to put the ball up in the air to him, and he had to catch it and run 65 yards for a touchdown. It was pretty simple. Quayshawn Brown is an interesting one. He had a huge game against UConn, and they really used him on a lot of those pop passes, jet sweep, that type of look. Other than that, he's barely been used. He's barely been able to get free. So you're Duke fans got the taste of what Quayshawn could do, but then he hasn't done it in 3 games since then. So we'll see if he breaks back out in this game.
Connor, I'm looking at your defense. You know, I see Duke 16th in the country in sacks. Knowing Manny as long as I have, I remember him at Middle Tennessee State, at Mississippi State. He likes to be very aggressive on defense. What do you expect from him this weekend against Florida State? And what type of problems can they give Florida State's offense that really doesn't need to have problems at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be pressure. It's going to be blitzes. It's going to be trying to play in your backfield. That's everything about this defense. That's kind of the one major shift. I know, Patrick, you asked me in the beginning, like Mike Elko and that defense is kind of built to get you to third down and confuse you and bring a blitz and stop you on that down. Manny's defense, I would say, is more geared toward winning first and second down and getting you in behind the chains, and then they want to beat you there. Like it's I know every defense wants you to play behind the chains, but with Manny, the TFLs and sacks are just prioritized so much, and those are coveted, and that's why they're second in the country in TFLs, and they were second going into last week, so they stayed there even through an off week.
Yeah, listen, and they bring it from everywhere too. I mean, the second and third level, they're bringing. You look at who's got the most pressures. You look. I mean, some of the linebackers, they don't bring them that much, but when they do, they get home. The corners and safeties too.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like the one major piece of the defense where I thought they lost a great player, and I was really curious about who would replace him was. I thought Brandon Johnson was one of the best defensive players in the ACC the last 2 years. He was their nickel. He had great all-around numbers. He'd have his hand in fumbles and interceptions and pressures, and he was a sure tackler. And he went to Oregon, and they've replaced him with Cameron Bergeron, who is doing all those things kind of.
Yeah.
Like I would say he is, if not the MVP, he's one of the 2 or 3 most important players on this defense as the nickel, and he's really been able to generate pressures when they've brought him. He's been good in coverage, so they've been able to fill that hole. And yeah, that nickel position is so valuable these days, especially in the ACC when everybody runs 3 receivers out there. You have to be able to have somebody that covers, but you also have to have somebody strong enough to play run support.
Yeah, Bergeron, 40 pass rushing opportunities, 11 pressures. That's impressive. That's an impressive success rate on his part. And I think he's the 3rd leading tackler on the team. I was really impressed with what I saw from him. 32 tackles, 6.5 tackles for a loss. Also has a sack to his credit. Really good player there. And you're right. This is going to be interesting with between these two teams that really struggle on 3rd down. To see which team's able to find the most productivity in those down and distance situations, which, obviously the thing, probably the thing that both of them needs to do. Yeah. Who gets the third? I think whoever has the most success 3rd down is probably going to give themselves a distinct advantage. But what makes it absolutely critical is which team actually does the best on 1st down, right? To minimize 3rd and longs. And of course, I think it's going to be interesting to see how how much he does blitz this week, because Florida State's starting 2 new offensive guards, or actually Chris Otto making his second start at guard, and then Jalen Early moving from right tackle to right guard. So that'll be interesting. But yes, when I started doing the research, they bring it from everywhere. They've been really good against the pass. They've been not as good against the run. What is the deficiency in the run defense versus the strength in the pass defense?
If I had to put a handle on it, I would say it's what are you taking away? And I think Duke is more geared around not giving up big chunk plays. And so they'll, anybody that plays North Carolina, you're going to base your entire game plan around stopping Omarion Hampton. He got him, but not for as many yards as I think they could have had if Duke could play them a little more straight up. So it's a defensive line that, like, they had a lot of work to do. As I said, they had to replace so much. I mean, they're bringing in a freshman defensive end to play nose tackle who's probably like 250 pounds, Kevin O'Connor. But they're able to kind of shoehorn him into a role and get him on the field to spell some of the defensive tackles like Aaron Hall and Kendi Charles. They're playing a freshman defensive tackle, Preston Watson, who is a Florida guy. I think he went to Seminole High School. So they're piecing things together on the defensive line, and I think that's probably where the deficiency shows up in their run defense.
All right, now obviously playing Florida State may help because Florida State just can't run the ball this year. How do you think that will impact Florida State struggles, last in NCAA FBS and running yards per play? How do you think that will influence how Manny decides to try to defend Florida State, particularly with a inexperienced quarterback who had a little life to him in the passing game 2 weeks ago against Clemson? It's something I think Mike's going to want to try to build on. We'll find out if the 2 new guards help Florida State in the run game. But if you're Manny, knowing what you know about him after 6 games, do you think he will say, hey, we're going to let you try to run the ball and we're going to play coverage and not let you beat us passing? How do you think he approaches this particular game?
I think it's probably more what you said. I think it is, kind of dare the guy making his 4th start as a quarterback to beat you through the air. That's what I would do if I had Duke's defense, to be honest. And like I gotta think Brock Glenn, even though it's only his 4th start, he's seen some stuff, right? Like he's seen Louisville, Georgia, and Clemson. I don't know if anybody could have 3 tougher opponents to make their first 3 career starts.
Yeah.
he got indoctrinated by fire. There's no doubt about that. And it continued against Clemson because I'm going to tell you what, that kid took a beating and kept on going. And he is a tough kid. I'll give Brock that. He is tough. So, yeah, and this is another good defense he's going to have to go against.
Yeah, like I just wrote into the preview, like it's not like he gets a little bit of a reprieve because this is the first time he's starting against a team that's unranked, but it's also not like Duke is taking it easy on opposing quarterbacks this year. Like you rattled off the sacks number and the TFL number. So yeah, I think Duke it'll be more of, Duke's staff saying, let's do what we do and get them confused, get after their young quarterback. And I think that's how you defend Florida State in this one.
Now, I got a question for you on how good Duke's cornerbacks are because their numbers are really good. Chandler Rivers and Joshua Pickett. Rivers has been targeted 24 times, only given up 14 completions, according to PFF. Josh Pickett targeted 21 times and has given up 9 receptions. Those are pretty good numbers when you start doing PFF research and look at other cornerbacks around the country. Just how good are those guys? And, they're both relatively new names. I don't remember either one of them from last year.
Well, you should remember Chandler. He had a pick 6.
I should remember that. Probably put it out of my mind.
Yeah. No, I think pretty highly of both of those guys. I think Chandler Rivers is a budding star in this league. He is small. I think Duke probably lists him at 5'10". I don't know if I believe that. But man, he is a sure tackler in space. And if you break a tackle from him, I think you've done something really, really well. He's interesting because he came from Texas. He signed with committed with David Cutcliffe. Then he signs for Mike Elko when Elko gets the job, and Elko tells us, hey, we scouted this guy when I was at Texas A&M. Like, I liked him. They played him for the last 2 years, moving him around a little bit as a backup, and really over the second half of last year is where he emerged as a starter. And now he's playing for Manny, and he's even better than what he had been for the last 2 years. So I think he's really strong. He's really good. Joshua Pickett is interesting because Joshua was a starter in like 22, was not much of a starter last year, and he's kind of continued to ascend, and he's having obviously a really good season. So corner is a strength of this team.
Connor,
go ahead.
Yeah, Connor, one thing about this game, I didn't know this before. I did a prediction today that Duke has never beaten Florida State.
Yeah.
Do the players in that locker room know this? Has Manny stressed it, like that there's an opportunity here to make history this weekend? It doesn't matter whether Florida State's 1 or 5 when you've gone against a team so many times and never beaten them. Is this something that's been stressed on this team this week or during this season?
I don't know about stressed, but they're definitely aware of it. Like Eli Pankel talked to us the other day and brought it up. If I remember the correction or the question correctly, he brought it up kind of unprompted. So they're aware of the fact that Duke has never beaten Florida State. I don't think it's been, plastered on the locker room wall or anything like that, but there's awareness there. Like, we're not going to be breaking any news to anybody in the post game if it plays out that way.
We're trying to give you some material. We're trying to give you some material to put up on our board so we can motivate this team.
Well, let me ask you this: Do you think in today's free agency world of college football that resonates with today's kids, that could serve as a motivating factor for Duke, that hey, you can do something that no other Duke team has done before? Do the players still buy into that kind of stuff, or is it not about that anymore?
I think we talked to, I can't remember which transfer it was, but we talked to one of the guys who was new to Duke and going into the Carolina game, and they hadn't beaten Carolina since 2018 when Daniel Jones was Duke's quarterback. And he basically told us, like, yeah, I'm new here, but it doesn't take you that long once you get to Duke to understand that like you need to win the Carolina game. Like that one's bigger. It's one of those things where the players all say the right thing during the week, and then if something happens in the game that plays out and it's some kind of history making win, then you get all the answers afterward of, yeah, this game was bigger. Like this game did mean a little extra to us. Like we had a little extra juice today. You'll always get that with these kids. So, and especially like Eli Pankel brought up to us, he knows that Duke has never beaten Florida State, but it's also something like he's been at Duke for 6 years. This is his last chance to beat Florida State. Not that he's had a ton of them because they were obviously in different divisions under the previous construction of the league, but yeah, it resonates with I think most of the kids these days.
Yep. Hey, this is something I think is going to be a key to the game, and I know nobody wants to hear it. Probably not either you or Fish, but I think there's going to be about 8 to 10 plays that are going to help decide this football game, and they're all going to happen on fourth down because you've got two of the best punters in America, and I think Alex Mastromanno leads the nation with a 49.2-yard average. 14 of his 34 punts have resulted in opponents starting their ensuing drive inside their own 20-yard line. You switch over to Duke. Cade Reynolson is averaging 45.2 yards per punt, ranks 18th in all of college football. 17 of his 33 punts have resulted in opponents starting their own next drive in their own 20-yard line. They both regularly kick the ball over 50 yards. He has forced Cade, has forced 18 fair catches. These guys are weapons, and both of them will have a chance to impact the game because both offenses have a hard time driving the field and sustaining drives. If you go back and look at their drive charts and look at their number of first downs, they're both worse than the ACC. Number of first downs, third downs, all those stats are. They would like to flip, but the guys that are going to make, I think an important part of this game will be special teams, particularly the punting game. Do you guys agree with that?
I know I do. I mean, this is one of those games that I kind of wish Pat McAfee wasn't as overexposed as he is now and was still doing the game calls, because this is a game that I would love for him to call because it's two great punters, and field position and the way these guys punt is going to play a pretty large factor in this game, I would think.
Yeah. What about you, Fish?
About what? I missed the question.
Well, never mind. We'll go to the next question.
No, I mean, if you're talking about Pat McAfee,
No, we're talking about punting. The two punters.
Yeah.
Two of the best punters in America.
That's why you lost my focus there. I don't really pay attention to punters.
This is my warning. All right, so Fish is the perfect example. FSU and Duke fans, if you're watching and listening to this, do not go up and get a beer when they go to the fourth down, because it's going to be 8 to 10 of the most exciting plays in the game.
I hate punters and kickers, man. I'm going to be straight up and honest.
Well, first of all, how do you hate Alex Mastromanno? The kid is fun to watch.
That means FSU's losing if he's out there.
Well, he's fun no matter what. He punts once or 10. Who cares? Last year, we get to see him a lot. This year, we're getting to see him a ton because his last year here, he's going to be a first or second round pick in the draft. He's that good. He's Ray Guy of his generation. I just think that if you're into this game, you will want to watch and see how average field position plays out. And those two guys, Mastromanno and Reynolson, did I say his name right?
Yeah.
Yep. They will have one of those guys will have if not both, will have a significant impact on this game. How do you think this particular Duke football team looks at this particular FSU football team? Because when you're 1-5, that decal on the side of your helmet doesn't usually carry as much weight as it typically does. And, in the past, there's been a lot of intimidation wherever Florida State goes just because of the brand. How do you think this Duke football team and listen, obviously Manny's got some time around the program and he's been around. He's played them at Florida State when he was the head coach at Miami, NC State. He's beat them at both places. How do you think this particular football team at Duke feels about this particular FSU football team?
I mean, just going off what they've told us, they look at them as a good team with a bad record. That was kind of the phrasing from their right tackle, Brian Parker II, told us that the other day. They know that it's still a talented Florida State team, especially coming from the offensive line perspective, looking at Florida State's defensive line and some of those guys and what they can do still athletically and physically. You certainly don't look at those guys like Joshua Farmer and Patrick Payton and say they play for a 1-5 football team. You look at them and say they're monsters who can wreck our entire game plan if we let them. So,
yep.
It can all change if we get out there and Duke looks to be sleepwalking and gets down 20-0. I'll reserve my right to change my opinion on how Duke sees Florida State if that happens.
Well, listen, we just be Florida State would just be happy to get to 20 points. It's been a while. It's been since Georgia Tech that they got to 21. They got 21 that day.
I don't think Conor's going to recognize this version of Florida State. Trust me, that's
probably fair. I saw them when they came to Wake last year, and I was, I think, finished with my story by the early third quarter.
Yeah.
You talking about last year's Florida State team?
Yeah, this ain't the same.
Oh, yeah, they were pretty good. They were pretty good, especially had Jordan and Keon and all those guys. Yeah. All right, you mentioned the offense. You mentioned Florida State's defensive line. I was going to ask you this when we were talking about Duke's offensive line, but we kind of moved on to defense. How do you think this offensive line can hold – and listen, this defensive line has not played up to expectations, save one game, which was Cal. They played winning football against Memphis on defense, but still couldn't get the job done when it mattered. And that was more of a pass defensive thing. But how do you think this Duke offensive line holds up? And let's just take Florida State's defensive line resume as it is, right? Inconsistent, not dominant at times can be very good, at times can be disruptive. But how do you think the offensive line for Duke, or the offense as a whole, maybe the schematically, holds up against this Florida State front?
I think that's probably the best thing for Duke, that they're coming off an off week. And I know both teams are coming off an off week, but I mean, Duke played 6 games in a row. They went from fall camp into 6 straight. They were worn down the last time we saw them against Georgia Tech. And we learned after the fact that they did not practice with shoulder pads on once leading into the Georgia Tech game. So I think the place that's going to benefit the most is Duke's offensive line. I think they'll kind of get back to playing a little more physical. They did not play that physical. I didn't think they played that physical against Georgia Tech, and I think a lot of that had to do with where their meters were and how pushed toward the empty signal that they were. Yeah. And it's been 2 games in a row that Duke has played the 5 starting offensive linemen and had no rotation. The 4 games before that, they had rotated a guard in there and at least alleviated a little bit of pressure with the snap counts. But man, it's hard to play. If I'm doing the quick math in my head, it was probably about 140 to 150 snaps. And you're the only guy out there on the offensive line. So the off week is really going to help that unit, I think, for Duke.
How do you see this game playing out? The last question for you. I know we've taken more than 30 minutes. I told you that's what it would be. But we're good about that at the Osceola. We talk a lot because we love football. But how do you –
Put it on record. Put it on record. What do you think, man? What's going to happen?
Well, you don't have to give us a prediction, but just –
Yeah, he does. Come on,
if
man.
you want to, go ahead.
Conor, come on, man. This is your one shot. Probably in the next 20 years you could predict Duke. Come on, do it.
Listen, Fish is just looking for some company because he's the only person with the Osceola that picked Duke to win.
I'll give you some company. I'm not going to put a score on it, but I do think Duke wins a close game, right in line with the line on the game. I think Duke is a 2 or 3 point favorite, maybe.
Yeah. It might have gone to 2, but it was 3 at one point.
Yeah, so I think Duke wins a tight one. I do think it's going to be low scoring. Like, Duke's offense has been inconsistent. Florida State with Brock Glenn, I just don't know that you can trust them to score more than 20 points. So I think you're looking at something in the neighborhood of like a 16-13 type of punt fest, and
there's a lot of scuttlebutt around Tallahassee that they may play Luke Cromenhawk too, for quarterback for Florida State. That's going to be interesting to see what that does to the offense. 1 game after Brock Glenn should have entrenched himself, but there's a lot of reasons for that. But yeah. I think there's some interesting dynamics to this game for sure.
Yeah, I had Kurt do a behind, across the beat for me, and he mentioned that. So I'm glad that the readers of Devils Illustrated know that could be coming. Yeah, I don't see this game getting into the 40s. The total might not get into the 40s.
No way.
Yeah.
I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
Listen, Duke's had 26 and somebody scored 26 in a bunch of Duke's games. Either
Duke scored 26 in their first 3 games.
So I'm going with 27. I'm going with the winner.
I think Connor better stay up in the press box for this one because he may get run over at the end of the game. I'm just going to predict that.
Oh, by the crowd?
Yes.
That was I did bring that up on a podcast earlier this week. It's like if you're ever going to see a team storm the field for beating a 1-5 team, like this is going to be it.
Yeah. Yes.
When Florida State started this season, Connor, there was a lot. They were calling it the revenge tour. But I did not know when they said that meant revenge for the rest of the ACC.
Everybody else's revenge.
Jeez, Pete. Yeah, Florida State. Listen, this is going to be an interesting game, and I think this is a big game for Florida State. I think it's a big game for Mike Norvell. I don't know how happy the fan base would be if he was the first head coach ever to lose to Duke. It's just not something you expect in any one season. Of course, now, I don't think it has anything to do with Mike's job security. He's going to be here for a long time because of that new contract. But, yeah, I think this is a huge game for Florida State. I think that they've got to show some pride in this game, not only as a football team, but as a coaching staff, as a whole. I mean, I think there's got to be some – you got to hope that they come off of it is.
Pat, they lose this weekend. The message board may go down. Like you'll see flames coming up. Like I don't think the fans of Florida State they can handle losing to do that.
Yeah, I really don't know what happened.
Stay away from lock up guns and weapons this weekend.
Yeah,
dude. Honestly, man, this thing.
Well, I put in the article today that we wrote our game. I don't, as a Florida State alum, it's just hard to wrap your head around the fact that Florida State, even at 1-5, could lose to Duke or to Wake or multiple people in the ACC. I mean, the fact that we're in here talking about this being such a close game, and the fact that Duke is the favorite. I mean, it's just like I said before the show or the start of the show. This has been I don't know if any of the people that are watching this or Connor, you're a Seinfeld fan, but the bizarro world of episode of Seinfeld is what this football season reminds me of. It's like somebody else is walking around in Florida State uniforms and Florida State coaching stuff. It's like it's just bizarre. But anyway, all right, Connor, listen, we know you probably need to go. Where can people go, Florida State fans that are members of Rivals and actually might want to any of the free content you might have? Where can they go to check your coverage of Duke out?
Yeah, it's Devils Illustrated is duke.rivals.com. Got plenty of stuff up there and plenty of basketball coverage too. I think with Duke, I'm obligated to throw that mention in there at least once. So come check it out and we'll get going.
Speaking of that, Bob, I think we're in such dire need of positive coverage at Florida State. Bob went and covered the exhibition baseball game in Pensacola this weekend, Florida State versus Auburn. So we are now transitioning to baseball, and it's still October, and that sport doesn't start till like mid-February. All right, Connor, we appreciate it, man. Hey, Fish, do you want to stick around, or do you need to go too?
No, I got to take off, man. So.
Okay. All right. Well, we will not have a commercial break, and we will not be back because Fish is leaving me high and dry. But listen, we hope you enjoy the show. Connor, we appreciate you coming on. If you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com. It'll take you to the same place. We've got our predictions and keys to an FSU victory on there. We also have our scouting report, which went out yesterday on the Blue Devils. To talk a little bit about their personnel and tendencies, and then of course Kurt's got an article on whether Luke Kromenholt may play or not. Just so as a comprehensive answer to that question, Luke will end up playing in 4 games this year. They do not want to burn his red shirt, I don't think, unless they have to. He is going to play against Charleston Southern, so it's just a matter of what other 3 games they get in. They've got 6 to go, so he may or may not play in this game, but to answer Kurt's article, he could play in this game, and we'll see whether it happens. If you're not a subscriber to the Osceola YouTube channel, please hit the subscribe button before you leave today, and obviously hit the notification button so that you get notified when we do live and tape shows. But Conor, we appreciate the heck out of it. Fish, have a great time down there looking for prospects in South Florida. And
hey, Conor, it's good meeting you, man.
On Friday night, Mark
you,
Salva and myself will be back for our live post-game reaction show to Florida State's game against Duke. Everyone have a great Thursday night, and we'll see you tomorrow night on the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines.
Take it easy.